Alright everyone, Budweiser fucked around and is certainly now finding out. Now, I'm not talking about this story too much because, well, I don't drink beer. I can't participate in a Budweiser boycott, for example. I don't really care who companies partner with. Yeah, okay, it's somebody who is deeply non-fitting for your beer brand, and they're finding this out, and I'll get into that link in the description. It doesn't offend me. I don't really care. It's more like, you're not reading the room. You don't understand your core demographic, at least in terms of U.S. drinkers of Anheuserbusch products. It's middle America. It's like NASCAR fans and shit like that, and that's not always a stereotype. A large proportion of the beer that's consumed is consumed by a small portion of the population. This is the other thing that they're not understanding and that a lot of people analyzing this don't understand. A handful of really heavy drinkers are the ones drinking all the fucking beer. A small proportion is drunk by people who have a couple beers on the weekend. They go out with their friends a couple times a year to a party and have a couple of Budweisers. That's a small portion. It's sort of like with fast food. A handful of consumers eat fast food on a constant basis and are worth 1,000 customers that just go there occasionally when they're on a road trip. So that'd be someone like me. I'd be in the latter category. In fact, I can't remember the last time I had fast food, like fucking McDonald's or something like that. Oh no, I make better burgers, I make better fries, I make better fried chicken, so why the fuck would I want to go to eat fast food when I make it myself? It would be a lot healthier too. I don't soak it in probably decomposing human flesh or whatever the fuck they use to flavor their fucking over-salted fries. Budweiser, as far as week over week, is down 26% in sales, and that includes not just at restaurants and stuff, that includes liquor stores and grocery stores and restaurants. So across the board, if you compare this last week with the same week the year prior, it's more than a quarter of a drop in the amount of beer product that they've moved. And it's not just Bud Light, by the way. That is huge. In fact, it's the biggest drop that the industry apparently has ever seen. And so they definitely read the room wrong. Now, they're going to get some new customers. Occasionally some hipster who prefers Pabst to say, oh, thank God, now I can finally try a Budweiser. I hear that it's good, but my dad used to drink it, but now he switched to Pabst because Budweiser hired Dylan Mulvaney, and so I'm going to switch to the Budweiser. So it's another inversion. Like, I guess Gen Z are going to be, the woke side of Gen Z will be a bunch of Bud Light drinkers. In other words, piss beer. So they misread the room. They're suffering the consequences. Again, I don't really give a shit who they hire, unless it's someone who's totally heinous, and Mulvaney is more like fucking cringe lord mode than heinous. Just a grifter, just an astroturfer who's famous for being famous or whatever, I guess. An influencer, whatever the fuck. I don't really care about that, and I can't boycott the beer because I don't drink beer. But it is funny, it is amusing to watch them piss away literally a quarter of their customer base. And the week over week for the prior week was down more than 20% already. It's still dropping somehow. That's not good news for a company. And it could be why their shares are down so much too. Here's my opinion on beer in general though. I never really understood it. Like, I used to drink beer sometimes, including some Bud Light. That's more for like it's 100 degrees out and you don't want to drink water because you still want to imbibe alcohol because you're trying to get tipsy. And so, you can't get much more than tipsy on a light beer anyway. And so you drink basically water that bread basically wandered through briefly with a little bit of a coating of yeast. It's like, 4% alcohol? So it's nothing. It's even standard beers tend to be 5 or 6%, depending on the kind. When I did drink beer, I generally, if it was a piss beer, I preferred Foster's for the flavor. Not that beer is ever particularly flavorful, unless it's like some craft brewery making, a raspberry jam beer or something like that. I never really saw the concept of it though, especially certain types of beer. Okay, maybe a stout in winter and a chilled pale ale in summer is refreshing. Okay, that's perfectly fine. But I'm never really into it very much. And I would encourage people, like, look, if you're boycotting Budweiser and saying, fuck Budweiser, they're woke. The thing you should do is just quit drinking alcohol, and I'll tell you why. Because all the other beer companies are pressured to go woke as well. You're going to have smaller, like, regional chains that deliberately cast themselves as the non-woke beer, and slap the U.S. flag and a MAGA hat on the cover and say, this is now the Trump IPA or something like that. You're going to get those, but as far as these larger beer manufacturers, again, they have to participate in the grift known as ESG. They're not going to come out and castigate Budweiser. What did Budweiser do almost instantaneously? They did a 180 with their next ad, and it's star-spangled bullshit. And by the way, that backfired because then they just heaped even more derision on themselves because the handful of Pabst drinkers that were saying, okay, I can finally try the good piss beer, the good shitty beer, then they immediately turned their backs on the company. You didn't win back any of the MAGA hat-wearing rednecks either. Even Don Jr. couldn't save them. They did come out and point out that if you're going for the pragmatism over ideology sort of screed in the 24 election, Budweiser does disproportionately donate to Republican candidates. And so a handful of Republicans came out and said, okay, you've made your point and rattled swords, but, we want those donations. Even that hasn't stymied it, hasn't stanched the bleeding. 26% year over year is a massive drop. Can you imagine if that happens to the average company, that company starts to fail? I suppose only the fact that they are so ubiquitous in the beer market and so well known, and they're here in the Netherlands too, there's Budweiser. It's all over the place. I guess only the fact that they're too big to fail, basically. They feed too many people their poison. They're too popular at poisoning people's livers and causing various birth defects and Greta Thunberg syndrome and shit like that, so they can't go the way of the dinosaur. But then again, Sears did fail some years back, inexplicably, after being one of the most successful companies in the fucking world. Yeah, so if it can happen to them, maybe it can also happen to Budweiser. I'm not going to hold my breath, but even seeing them suffer a little and then have to backtrack, and seeing them then have to shell out potentially billions of dollars for another ad blitz to try to fact-check the misinfo, and that's literally how they're labeling it. There's so much misinfo about us and our partnership with Dylan Mulvaney. I don't think it's going to work, though. If I were Budweiser, I would go quiet for a couple of months. I would go completely quiet. I wouldn't say a goddamn thing. Not on social media, not on the TV. I'd pull the ads, save that money up. And then later on, then you would have an apology tour, basically. That's about all. Peace out.